Safe church, it's a general category of all the different things that we do as a church to make church a safer place for people, especially vulnerable populations. So it might include anti-racism training or training about disability issues or what have you. Screening in faith, related but slightly different, and that's a set of specific policies and procedures for dealing with basic issues related to safety, especially for children, youth, the frail elderly, those in need of pastoral care. But screening in faith also deals with roles of clergy, wardens, treasurers. I talked about wardens earlier, but screening, knowing who they were, custodians, those who lead worship, and so forth. Screening in faith is the responsibility of corporation, but you can delegate that work to someone else. But corporation retains oversight and responsibility for screening in faith. And if you go onto our diocesan website and search Safe Church, you'll be taken to a page that has 6 documents. I gave out one of them. It says, I think it's frequently asked questions, but there are 6 documents there. And, if you printed out those 6 PDFs, you would have a really comprehensive program that goes right into details about having windows and doors and all kinds of things. But I thought the frequently asked questions would be helpful to you. I probably don't need to explain to this crowd why we care about screening in faith, but if someone asks you, well, why do you have to screen people? Why can't you just trust people? You can tell them that we're really doing 2 things. First, and most importantly, is we're trying to keep people safe. I mean, that's really what we are trying to do. We're trying to create church as a place that's safe in all kinds of ways. And that's not just about avoiding sexual abuse. You're screening for bullies, for those who make threats of physical violence. Someone, I actually had to deal with this once, who was teaching terrible things about God in Sunday school. Luckily, within a week of my arrival, she just decided to move, because I thought, oh my goodness, how do I deal with this? But that would have been a safe church issue. People sending nasty emails and so forth. Any of those can make some people feel unsafe. So keeping people feeling safe is what we're trying to. And it's important to realize, though, that by screening someone, it means by definition that you're not totally inclusive and welcoming, at least when it comes to being a leader, because part and parcel of screening might mean that some people are screened out of certain types of ministries, certain types of leadership. So just to be cognizant of that. Now, I said there were 2 things, keeping people safe, but also important is you are protecting the reputation of the church as a whole. For all churches are impacted when something goes wrong at another church. We're all tarred with the same brush. It doesn't matter what denomination we are. And so by following screening in faith as best as you can, you're helping to rebuild society's trust in the church as a place that has good news, that actually is talking about God's love. So you can help increase public trust. You can improve the reputation of your congregation in your community. So those are 2 things about keeping people safe and rebuilding and protecting the reputation of the church as a whole. So it's a really important thing. Who needs a police record check for the vulnerable sector? Any idea of who needs? There's regular PRCs, but then there's for the vulnerable sector. Does anyone know? Mm-hmm. With children? Those dealing with children, yes. Stephanie?
Pastoral care, hospital visits.
Those doing visits in the hospital or other pastoral care needs, yeah. Organists, Sunday school teachers, youth group leaders. Now, police used to give them to anybody who's asked, but I've noticed that across our diocese, most police groups are restricting them to volunteers who were, or employees who work with vulnerable populations. So the letter that goes to them, you need to specify that, you're working with the elderly or what have you. The regular so-called police record checks, who would need them? Any guesses, any thoughts? Employees, yes.
Wardens.
Church wardens, yes. Treasurers, yes. Envelope secretaries, parish administrators, custodian, whether paid or volunteer. Now, what do you do if a police record check shows that someone has a criminal record? Does it mean that they can't be a volunteer or a leader?
No.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends on the ministry, depends on what the crime was. So that's something that you can talk about in corporation. If you need to, reach out to me or to Paul, just for a sounding board. You make those determinations. It's very important. And it's okay to say, well, we have a safe policy that would exclude so-and-so. But often you'll find that the person wouldn't apply wouldn't seek a ministry where a police record check is needed because they wouldn't want that revealed. The one thing that I would say, and that came up from a conversation earlier today, that if you know or suspect that there's a registered sex offender just maybe attending worship in your congregation, they're not a leader or what have you, it's good to reach out to the bishop's office because that person might get engaged in leadership and what have you. And we have a way of responding to that situation because they deserve a place to worship and what have you. But the bishop's office does want to know. So that's just something you can file away. Paul said this earlier. Take the time to get to know people. That's probably the most important thing about screening in faith, especially before inviting them or allowing them to take on a medium risk or high risk ministry. And we don't have time this morning to go into which is what, but on the website there's a very clear description of what medium risk and high risk ministries are. And so just get to know people. And local culture here is very important. A rural parish might have more discretion than a city parish where there's more strangers coming and going. But again, just like with church wardens, use your discretion. Not everyone is a suitable Sunday school teacher. Even reading scripture in church or leading the music in worship is significant. It's symbolically an important role. So, second Sunday that somebody arrives might not be the time to invite them into the choir. It's especially important to make sure the incumbent screens those who are invited to serve as lay administrators because of how much we reverence the bread and the wine. Now, new parishioners who've come from other parts of our diocese or within the city of Ottawa, maybe they've moved from a disestablished parish, they might still move into leadership more quickly than someone else who is just brand new, but they too still need to be screened. Even if they were a church warden, you get to know them. Your congregation is unique. You have your own way of looking at things. So all I can say is don't put people in positions of leadership before you get to know them and their gifts and their limitations. And remember, it's corporation who makes those determinations, not the parish administrator or the person who sets up the schedules, because everything's fine when it's going fine until it's not going fine, and then you wish you'd been more careful. You might not be able to read this whole thing, maybe you can, but if you have a printed bulletin and you're looking for a Sunday school teacher, you might consider putting something like this. If you're interested in helping with the Sunday school, please contact so-and-so. Everyone must be screened according to the church's Screening in Faith program, which includes a police records check. So other than the PRC, it doesn't really say what the screening is. It might be how you've seen them, that you know them, that they're nice, that they treat people with respect, that you think that they'd be willing to be taught in a Sunday school training thing. You decide whatever the screening in faith will be, but you do need to let people know, because you don't want people to volunteer for things and then be turned down or say, oh, well, you have to do this and that first. So do put it out there, especially for ministries that you're requiring a police record check. And training for a pastoral care team, if you happen to have one. That's another place where you would word it in some way so that people would know what was required. Training is definitely required for anyone that your parish would expect to visit someone when they're vulnerable, in the hospital or a long-term care home. Now, the clergy can provide the training, or they can invite people to attend online training. Since COVID, the Ottawa Pastoral Care Training Program is now online. There is a financial cost to your church for that, but it could be a wonderful investment for your parish. But however it happens, training needs to be provided, and that would be part of screening in faith. The one thing that I hope you never need, it would have said support from police services, okay? Safe Church is about feeling safe in church, and on rare occasions, and it's happened in a small town that I can think of. Nobody from that town is here today, but on a rare occasion, we need the help of the police in creating a feeling of safety and security. I suspect and assume it's more frequent in the urban parts of our diocese. But I was contacted about a year ago from, as I said, a small town. The church had been dealing with a situation for quite a long time, off and on, a person who was coming into worship and causing a ruckus. And my advice was to involve the police, talk to them ahead of time. They knew the person. There was reluctance to do that. But what I think always is that there's always people in your congregation who, not a lot of them hopefully, but from their childhood or from a marriage had experienced abuse of some kind, and to have someone come into church and cause a ruckus of any sort can really make it difficult for them to worship. And so I actually don't know exactly how that parish has since responded, whether they did get the police involved, but I know what happened in my church, my last church in Ottawa, and we eventually decided to contact the police, and they were lovely. They actually happened to know the person who had a sort of phobia about religious organizations, and I did wonder whether it had something to do with an abuse situation when they were younger related to the church. I don't know, but they were very respectful, and it dealt with the situation in a way that was very quiet, and the person moved on. So at any rate, just if it ever becomes a problem, or you know of a situation, you can reach out. We can talk about it, think through whether that's suitable. I'm sure at St. Albans you have your own way of dealing with what would be regular disruptions to worship, but that's a situation that is unique to your parish, and it fits how you guys respond. So just to know that that once in a while, to create a safe feeling, and one can't be ultimately safe, but you may have to make some decisions, and it's done for the good of all, and the corporation works together to respond. 2 policies. What this refers to is the final aspect of Safe Church that I'm letting you know about, is that our diocese has policies that help us if something goes wrong, whether it's a situation of abuse or harassment or violence of any kind, and they're more or less the same, but the focus is a little different. One is called workplace violence and harassment prevention, and one is parish violence and harassment prevention. So their policies, we don't have time to go into the details about either. You can find them on our website. But in general, the workplace policy is used when employees are involved, like clergy or lay employees, whereas the parish one covers volunteers, parishioners, tenants, or those who come to the church when the church is being rented out to a tenant. They're very, very similar. A few years ago, well, in the last 5 years, there's only been one situation that came to our diocese. We used the workplace policy. It was someone who had rented a church hall, and something happened when the church hall was being rented out. So it had nothing to do with the church whatsoever, but they had rented it out, and there was a situation. So we used the workplace policy. It was a little cumbersome, and we realized that if something does ever happen within a parish setting, we would want to have a similar policy, but one that used language that parishioners could understand, like volunteers, clergy, parishioners, church wardens. So that's why we have two, in case you're wondering, if you look on the website and you wonder about that. But they're very similar, a similar process, and it goes into detail. Things must be written before complaints move forward, so that rumors, innuendo, things posted on Facebook, none of that is sufficient to, engage a policy until it's written down. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
Could you say something about, under Safe Church, decisions about who you rent to in terms of other people or another denomination?
Oh, like other churches?
Yeah.
So if a congregation is approached by someone from another church or faith group and they want to rent to them, they would reach out to me at the bishop's office, and we've got a process of looking into who the group is and if we're in relationship with them, if we know who they are, and the bishop gives preliminary permission or not, and then Joel Prentice, our director of property, helps with coming up with a contract or a lease for an actual renter. So it's the idea of just making sure that you're renting to a church or faith group that your congregation would be comfortable with, that they would respect what you are doing in your church. And so there is a process there, yeah.